I'm going to have cataract surgery tomorrow. Who says a woman of 70 can't have stars in her eyes? Lights, camera, action! Books? Aloha and welcome back to my channel. I'm Marilyn Maya, the baby boomer booktuber, and this is, first of all, sorry for the bad joke. I got it out of a joke book. This is sort of my December 2020 wrap up. I've been on BookTube for 4 months now, and I've had a great experience in a lot of ways, but I've learned a lot about myself. So I thought I would just chat about some of my favorite books of the 4 months, and also what my plans are for the coming year of 2021. It's been a difficult year for everyone, and I have to say that I'm very thankful that I have my health, basically, and my family, and my boyfriend Jackson, who's taking the video, because I don't know how to make YouTube videos. I want to learn. That's one of my plans. But first, more importantly, I want to talk about my experiences on BookTube and what I've been reading and what I've learned. I've read many important books these 4 months, and I've reread a few. I have to say that my most interesting experience was Victober, when I read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. This was the closest that brought me to getting lost in a book, and I really enjoyed my experience. Then for Latinx-a-thon, I read and hauled many books, but the one that really caught my heart was In the Dream House by Carmen Machado. This was the most unusual memoir that I've ever read. It was the most innovative memoir that I've ever read, and I write memoir. That's what I write. This is a story about Carmen Machado and her girlfriend, or the person that she was living with in a lesbian relationship, and it was abusive. And how she goes about telling the story in second person, which is very unusual for a memoir anyway, but she uses different literary terms. The house is not really a house. It's the dream house as a metaphor, the dream house as an adjective, as different things that are literary. And it really opened my eyes to what memoir could be. I learned new words, new literary terms, but I also learned that in lesbian relationships there can be the same kind of abuse that are in cis relationships or any other kind of relationships. And she gets stronger throughout the novel, and she was able to tear herself away from that relationship. And also, her writing is very atmospheric and very poetic, which I appreciated. This book didn't get, it won a lot of awards, but to the general public it got a mixed review, I think. And I think you have to look beyond. She has a lot of footnotes in the book, but what I really appreciated, beside her telling of the story, was how she let everyone know that gender fluidity is something that's real, and people who are not, part of the queer population might not know that. I mean, she talks about during her period of time having relationships with men as well as women, and I really learned a lot from the book, and I learned a lot about writing, which is really great. But I can't say that I loved the book, because what loving a book to me is losing myself in it. And I can say the book was very cerebral, so I couldn't really lose myself into it. And that's what I learned about myself. So even though this was an important book and I enjoyed it, it wasn't really what I'm looking for in reading totally. So, and with the Anne Bronte books, going back to what I was talking about, I couldn't lose myself completely because of the restrictions of the time about religion. And Anne Bronte was one of the more religious Bronte sisters. So I felt that giving me a barrier to getting into the book as much as I wanted to. So what I learned about myself is that I could enjoy a book but be kept distant from it. And that's not what I'm really looking for in reading. Then I read Wow, No Thank You by Samantha Irby, which is a collection of humorous essays. And I really enjoyed this book. It got me really into my life and yet out of my life. I have to say that for someone who, she's gay and also has gender fluidity in her book, in this book. But I had so much in common with her. She's 40, she's black, and she's a lesbian, none of which I am. But I had so much in common with her. Her background, even though she's Midwest and I was in Brooklyn, but it really hit home and it gave me a lot of chuckles. But again, it wasn't a book that is my favorite type of really getting lost in a book. So those were my three, I guess, favorite books. There was also important books that I read, that the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which I talked about in length. And this was by Rebecca Skloot. And it's an important book. I talked about it. She was a poor black woman who had her cells stolen from her cancer cells. And they were made into big business while she, was not remembered. And it was an important book. It taught me a lot about how prejudice and being a minority in this country can lead to the most horrific treatment. And that was an important book. But like I said, I can't say it was my favorite book of my 4 months here. And lately, I've been reading a lot of health books because beside my eye problems, I also have peripheral artery disease. So I'm trying to heal myself with different ways. And I've read Dean Ornish's Undo It, Dean Ornish's Reversing Heart Disease, which I read a long time ago. But I think this is a new edition because he talks about his mental health. Another book, Joel Fuhrman, MD, with The End of Heart Disease. And I forgot one book that I wanted to talk about in my favorite rereads, which is Heartberries by Terese Murray Mailhot. And it's a powerful poetic memoir of a woman's coming to age on the Seabird Island Indian Reservation in the Pacific Northwest. This is a book about what came very close to. She's an indigenous woman and she experienced trauma, post-traumatic stress, same as I did. But being an indigenous woman and her experiences were very different than mine, of course. I really had to read this book over and over because it's not only poetic, but it taught me so much about mental illness, and I thought I knew it kind of all, which we can never think we know it all. But this is a powerful book, and I really suggest people read it, not only because she's an indigenous author, but because she, more than any memoir that I've read in the past, really goes on quite the heartbreaking journey of trying to make peace with her past. And not only her past, but being indigenous. And for me, being Jewish and Latina, we have what we call a past of our ancestor past that go through horrific times, and we bring that along in our, I believe that anyway, and I read that in other books, that we bring that traumatic past into our present life. And she goes through a lot of heartbreak with men, as well as trying to make peace with her mother and her alcoholic father who passed away. I really suggest that you read that book. But again, it didn't give me the feeling that I love to have when reading a book, and that's getting lost in the book. And I'll go into what I've read this month of December really fast. I DNF'd a book this month. It's called We Are All the Same in the Dark, and it got a terrific reviews from so many people that made me really question why I was DNFing. I wasn't enjoying it. It's basically a story about the discovery of a girl abandoned on the side of the road threatens to unearth the long-buried secrets of a Texas town legendary cold case. In this suburb atmospheric novel by the author of The Black-Eyed Susans. And after I started reading this and I wasn't enjoying it, I realized that I had read The Black-Eyed Susans, which also was very critically acclaimed. And for advanced praise for this book, it says it's psychologically absorbing, original, atmospheric. I could not turn the pages fast enough. I agree with all of that, except for the turning of pages. I was really stuck. But anyway, this story is told in two timelines and two characters' points of view. The first one is the girl. It all revolves around this man who lost his sister, Truman L. And he believes that his sister, who he loved very much and who protected him from his abusive father, is still living there. So he has some mental issues. And his girlfriend comes back to town, his old ex-girlfriend comes back to town, and she's a cop. And it's told in her, not the man with the mental illness, and her name, she had a very, Odette. Her name is Odette, and his name is Will, and the sister is Truman L. And then it changes. She's the girl that's found on the road is like 13 years old, and then it goes ahead 7 years, and it's in Odette's point of view. And this is where I started really not liking the book. So even though it's beautifully written, atmospheric, I DNF'd it. But I have to say I cheated, because I did go to the end and see who done it. So I don't know if anybody who's DNF'd a book can say they didn't read it, if they kind of skimmed through it, but well, I did. Then I was disappointed in a very wonderful author, Ruta Sepetys, Out of the Easy. This takes place in 1950, and it's in New Orleans, and it's in the point of view of the young girl. This is a young adult novel, and I thought I was going to have a good time with it, and in some ways I did. And it takes place in the French Quarter in a brothel house where this girl, Josie Moraine, grows up with more or less under the eye of the madam of the brothel. And she wants to get out of New Orleans and go to college. That's the whole premise of the book. And there's two love interests in the book, and I won't go into that. They were very tastefully done. But what I didn't like about it was that it was tied up too quickly into what I thought it was going to be. It was too predictable. And also the way they picture, she did a lot of research, Ruta Sepetys. She wrote also Between Shades of Grey, which I loved very much and I talked about in my last video. But this book, I thought, though she did a lot of research about the particular, what it was for prostitutes and madams in the French Quarter, I don't think she did enough research about the whole of New Orleans. So it was a little bit lacking for me. And in the end, the mother was, there was no good in her. But then I'm thinking, if there's no good in her, she did take this girl, her daughter, to be raised. She could have given her up for adoption or left her on the side of the road. Yet she showed as almost a completely bad character, and I didn't appreciate that. Also, I thought the book was maybe too young for me, though I'm not, I really don't mind reading young adult books if they're done well, like she did Between Shades of Grey so well that I didn't even realize it was a young adult book, or I didn't care. It's like reading The Diary of Anne Frank, which is, I guess, a young adult book, but you don't realize it because the story takes you out of it. Okay, so now we're going into a different realm. I read Cards on the Table, this by Agatha Christie, and it's a closed circle mystery. There are a bunch of people who could have done this murder right in plain sight. And I talked about this in my last video, so I'm not gonna, it's gonna be in the cards above, and if you wanna see the short review that I did. I didn't like this book. It was the favorite of a few booktubers as Agatha Christie, and I did not think it was her best book, though I enjoyed it for what it was. It was a Poirot book, and it had all the good stuff that Poirot, the detective, solves in the end, and I think it's readable. And then I picked up, another booktuber told me that their favorite book was called The Five Little Pigs. And I read this book way back in my 20s, and it was called Murder in Retrospect then. It might still be called that in Great Britain. But let me tell you, I am into this book and I'm loving it. And it made me realize a lot of things. First of all, do you know when you go into a book and you just go maybe 50 pages and then you just want to read, you don't want to go forward because you're so into it, it's so good that you start going back instead of forward, and then you're leaving it for the next day. And that's the way I feel about this book. From the beginning, I haven't read it all the way through. I'm going to wait until I finish my surgery and I'm allowed to read again. But this goes into what I love about reading, that immersive, that getting lost in a story. And that goes into what my plans are for the next year. And I guess my plans are not plans. I went on Goodreads and I put myself I gave myself a goal of 50 books to read. I'm a pretty fast reader, so and that's with my cataracts. So I think I'll make that number, but I don't care about making the number or not. What my goal is, I mean, to go on BookTube at age 70, what is my goal? You know, it's not to become a famous booktuber. And believe me, I've made so many friends, maybe not so many, but good friends that I think I'm going to be friends with forever. You know, my forever, not their forever. So my plan is to reread Agatha Christie and to rate them in what I think are the best Agatha Christie books. But I'm also going to read some 1930s books, and I've got some books coming up that in my next video, whenever that's going to be, whenever I can see again, that go into what life was like. And that's they're coming out with new out-of-print editions of really good books that I'm going to go into next time. I don't want this video to be too long, but I want to read more literary fiction. I'm going to read important books, don't get me wrong. I love nonfiction. I write nonfiction. I don't even write fiction. But I want to read books that give me that feeling that I had when I was a child, getting lost in the book, not wanting it to end, as well as reading important books that help me learn, like How to End My Heart Disease. And those books are interesting too. We all have a lot to learn. But to end this video, this is one of my favorite books that I had on my shelf. And I've been reading from it every video. And this is Meditations to Heal Your Life by Louise L. And the meditation today that I'm reading has to do with love. I see clearly in every direction. I mean, how apropos is that to my situation coming up tomorrow? I see clearly. I have clarity of vision and of purpose. My inner knowing always directs me in ways that are for my highest good and greatest joy. I connect with the infinity of life, where all is perfect, whole, and complete. In the midst of ever-changing life, I am centered. I begin to see the good in everyone and everything. I don't know if that's going to come, that I see the good in everyone and everything, but it's a good goal. I want to thank you for being my subscribers, and please subscribe if you haven't already. I will be back as soon as I can, and I really appreciate all of you, and I want to learn from other booktubers, and I want to make more friends. That is my goal for 2020, as well as just reading and writing and being a better person. So until we meet again, when I'll have clearer vision, hopefully, I wish you, my friends, aloha.